Hello, everybody. Welcome to Shame to Shine. I am Steph. I am so pleased to be here today with Sara Kidwell, who is a holistic executive coach and dear friend. And we have a very juicy topic for you that I think is going to be relatable to a lot of people. But first, I just want to say, Sara, thank you so much for coming on and welcome.
Thank you so much, Steph. I am so honored to be here.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, this is really exciting because Sara has a lot of years of executive coaching and in the corporate industry and is still very particular about who she shares her story with. So I respect that because we should all be very particular about how we share, especially in this social media age where there's kind of pressure to put your life on blast. And yet, this is really special, and I am really honored that Sara is coming to pull back the curtain a little bit on how she got to be such a phenomenal coach who's able to hold space in really big ways for cohorts of women in their transformation. So, all that said, let's get to it. I am hoping that people are like, what are you going to talk about? What is this story? So, Sara, will you jump in with us and take us to this beginning part of what is sort of the initial like shame or veil
Mhm.
that you're going to talk through today with us?
Yeah, thanks, Steph, for creating this space for me to be able to talk about this. And really, I wanted to share with you and unpack for your audience my journey of religious deconstruction and what that has been like for me, what the deconstruction has been like, and then what the reconstruction has been like for my spirituality. And so that's really what I want to go into today. And I'll set it up just by saying my background is evangelical Christianity. I was raised in a very religious household, went to church every Sunday and Wednesday, went to Baylor University, Baptist University, went to Focus on the Family Institute. So you're starting to gather. I was entrenched in this. My grandparents were Bible teachers, chaplains, and so I was really raised to believe a certain way, indoctrinated at a very young age, and learned very quickly when I was young, when I had a lot of curiosity and questions around the Bible, around the faith, that it was tamped down. There was some shaming around that, so that I didn't question too much, and it was the oh ye of little faith.
Yeah.
There were certain sayings that, would come up when you were in Sunday school when you were young to kind of to train you a little bit to just believe. And that really works in a way when you're young because belonging is so important in those environments. And so that's really my upbringing. And it wasn't until several years ago that things came to a point, a turning point in my life where I gave myself permission to start to question. And that's really what I want to chat with y'all about today.
Wow. Okay, excellent. And for those who are on board already with this idea of kind of being trained to believe a certain way, to be a certain way, where your identity is tied up and your community is tied up, and you fitting into a structure that you're not really allowed to test and push the boundaries on. Can you
Mm.
can you tell us what are some of the beliefs that you integrated about yourself at a young age? And there may be a lot, but just some that were particularly um, that particularly called for you to change, that kind of formed this is my conception of myself because of this belief system.
Mm. Yeah. That is such a deep question, and I love it because I think what comes up for me, and this comes up a lot with the women that I coach, it's deep-seated in worthiness. Where do we find our sense of self-worth, and how does that affect our self-love? And I grew up in a culture that said my worthiness was tied to God. It was because I was chosen. Therefore, I was worthy because I was His. And I really, going through the deconstruction process, came to, is it possible that I could be worthy simply because I exist? Just because I'm me, just because I am a soul getting to be here on earth, having a human experience, I'm worthy just because. And that was pretty pivotal for me as I was going through this period of my life. And I think really what allowed me to get there was, can I give myself permission? And can I say things like, what if? And perhaps, as I was just contemplating things, because those were things that I wasn't really allowed to do. I had to put on very strong blinders in order to stay in that world. And I saw a pattern, I saw a formula start to emerge. And once I saw the formula, I couldn't unsee it. And Steph, that formula was fear plus shame plus belonging equals control.
Ooh.
So if you are going to, how are you going to control someone? If you want to control someone, if you leverage fear and shame and belonging, belonging is such a powerful drug, right? If you leverage those things, then you can control people. And why would someone want to control you? For power and money. And once I started to realize that, and I could start to see things in that way, and I could just observe so uncomfortably so, let me tell you, um, that really gave me more and more permission to just go, I'm willing to be really uncomfortable. And that's what started to emerge. And there were catalysts along the way, moments where I thought, okay, I'm going to go deeper and deeper into this and allow myself to question.
Wow. So, so tell us about some of those events that
Mhm.
happened to get you to that point of I'm
Yep.
going to allow myself to start to question this.
Yeah. I think part of it started in my 20s at the Focus on the Family Institute, where they had very specific roles about what it meant to be a woman of God, the submissiveness that was required. You couldn't, teach in the church. There were very specific things, and that was really hard for me. And I kind of shut down after that experience, and at times in my life, I would be like, I just don't want to think about that. And then I would come back, right? I would come back to the religion because it was the way that I was raised about this is the right way to think. And I would say that was a moment. And then I had a moment just, I would say several years ago. I did 2 years worth of group work that was heart work, where I actually started to feel my feelings for the first time. My emotions were really happy and angry. Those were my two primary feelings that I thought that I was feeling. And actually, feeling my feelings deeply for the first time really allowed me to tap into who I was, allowed me to tap into my authenticity, and then allowed me to start to question. At the same time, I was um, I was in Nashville. I was in a religious community. The institution that I was working for was religious. I was a part of a church. And that environment that I was in really created this pressure cooker moment for me that really started to surface some things that I could no longer ignore along with doing this feelings work. And it was sort of this moment for me that almost felt like this explosion that I couldn't deny anymore, that I needed to look at this. And at the same time, it's wild how these things start to pile on top of each other. And it's like flashing lights, like we're not going to let you ignore this, Sarah, right? Like this experience was such that someone recommended to me a podcast, and the podcast was called The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill. And it was about this mega church in Seattle, and this pastor, Mark Driscoll. And I was listening to this podcast and I was horrified by it. And I thought, this is sounding a whole lot like the religious leaders that I have known, that I have been following. And being horrified listening to that, and then being in an environment where I was like, wait a minute, these things are, I can no longer excuse some things. I can no longer allow myself to say, this is in alignment for me when clearly it's no longer in alignment for me. My values of wanting to love myself deeply and love others deeply, this no longer feels in alignment for me. And I share all this vulnerably because I wish I had more people that were sharing these things at the time, that I could have heard. What is it like to go through deconstruction? And at the time, my thought was, I'm going to deconstruct in order to reconstruct, to be a super Christian, to be even better at apologetics. And that's not what happened at all. Those pieces didn't come back together the same way. And gratefully so. I am so grateful and so thankful for the journey that I've been on, for my experience, because it has led me, as your topic is, from shame to shine. It has led me to the shine. It has led me to this place of groundedness and peace and self-love and immense love for others. So that's a huge mouthful, just on what this has been like for me.
I am so grateful to you for sharing because I completely agree. And there's so much courage in talking about religious deconstruction because even for us as spiritual women and who are in relationship with people that still have very strong religious identities, there's a fear of like, I don't want to offend anybody where this is still in alignment for them. And there's a kind of integration or like an interweaving of what some would call patriarchy and Western religion that
Mhm.
that as we've talked has been problematic for both of us, and there's like
Mhm.
very much a place for women as you talked about at the Family Life Institute.
Mhm.
And even in my own experience, I took a True Love Waits class that was very much geared towards women being putting shame on women for doing
Mhm.
anything. And the guys were just like, guys are guys, but it's up to you, women, to keep your legs closed. And there was like even a demonstration with an orange that got more and more horrifying about
Mhm.
what happened to the orange if a woman were to do anything sexual with a man and like then having sex is like you squeeze the whole orange and do you really want to give your future husband a juiceless orange? So you have all
Mhm.
these girls that are like, no, I don't want to do that. And so there's really a lot of themes in the West between what religion is, what religious identity is, and what the role of women is. And so I I'd love to for you to comment on that and then just to let the audience know, and we're still going to talk about reconstruction, spiritual reconstruction as well, that you have already touched on, Sarah. But how much does that, how do you think about religious deconstruction as it relates to the role of the patriarchy in your own journey of shedding the the religious identities?
Yeah. Steph, I love that you went there with true love waits and the purity culture. That is the culture that I grew up in. Um, I I think it's extremely damaging, and it is a part of the culmination of, Christianity and the patriarchy, and also an obsession with sex. It is really how I think it's showing up in some ways, wanting to control what other people do sexually. And but I do think the purity culture, the way that I experienced it was you were given a lot of promises, right? Wait, save yourself, and there's one perfect person that God's going to bless you with, and everything's just going to go swimmingly. And none of that was in the Bible, come to find out, didn't realize. Um, but I think that it has been damaging for people to grow up in that type of culture. And I do think that it flavors that world. And I will say this, my goal in sharing my story is really not to persuade anyone to go through a deconstruction, to convince anyone to think differently. It really is for those that if you are listening to this and your heart, there's a tightness in your chest, or your heart is racing, or your mouth is gaping open, and you're like, oh, I am identifying with this right now. I just want to give you permission to just feel that and be able to, when you're ready, to be able to ask the hard questions to yourself and about what your beliefs have been. And that's really my goal in sharing all of this.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for saying that. That is so lovely and important. And my goal too with Shame to Shine, that it is really about reconnecting with ourselves. That this is the love story of a lifetime that we've both experienced is actually the Hollywood type of beautiful, unexpected, life-giving, nourishing love. It can be found connecting with your heart, connecting within. So that is that is the big picture goal. We're so aligned on that. And then the paths to get there are numerous, and you follow your own intuition on which one resonates. So let's talk about then the spiritual reconstruction, where it's really interesting that when you went into it, you thought, I'm going to become a better Christian, and yet you went through that that rebirth and came out a little bit different than what you anticipated. So tell us about that process and where you are.
Yeah, I will say there were moments going through the deconstruction where I had these moments where I didn't anticipate, my critical thinking around it had really been shut off in some ways. And even just starting to go through Genesis alone, I had these moments of, oh gosh, I if I don't believe this, what do I believe now? And I had a little bit of a panic in the beginning of it, of grasping at, well, if it's not this, then what is it? And I caught myself in this for about a 2 week period and had a couple of really wise women speak into me and just say, can you just let it be? Can you just sit in the discomfort and not have to have answers? And that was really pivotal for me because I had grown up in an environment that was very black and white, right and wrong. And you needed to know, you needed to be sure. And what I realized is the more sure someone was, the less I was sure if I believed it. And so I needed to really take that advice and just sit in my discomfort. And I will say, I went through all the stages of grief with it. And I I had to be so comfortable with the anger that it brought up. And what I realized through the process is how beautiful anger is, because anger is the change maker.
Mm.
When we are angry enough about something, it causes us to go, ah, okay, that's telling me something is out of alignment. What do I need to do to find my alignment here? And in that process, and it took time, one of the things that grounded me the most when it came to like reconstructing my spirituality was really leaning into nature. And I know that that may sound very woo-woo to some people. If I would have heard this years ago, I would have thought that's nuts. But I feel like grounding myself with the phases of the moon, with being actually in nature, I became a tree hugger, which I never would have believed. But these rhythms and just being by the ocean when I could was very grounding for me and reminding me of our universe and how big it is, how wonderfully small I am, but that I still matter deeply. And those things really started to ground me as I started to dream again about what's possible and reading different books and reading it with a critical mind and thinking, well, what if? Perhaps, and maybe, and not reading it as whatever this person is sharing is truth, but I wonder.
Mm.
And that was a really different way for me to approach my life and my belief system.
What were some of the big themes coming up around I wonder or perhaps or what if that you were asking yourself?
It's a great question. One of them was I wondered, is hell real?
Mm.
If God is so good and loving and all knowing, is hell real? Would I really be sent there? Could people that I love really be sent there? It really took me to a place. I'm very, very fortunate to have amazing parents, extremely loving parents. And I put myself in the position of, would my own parents do that? And I thought, no, they wouldn't. Um, and I and that was one thing that came up. There were many other questions that I had to wrestle with. And I know that there is a lot of judgment and criticism when people start to question, when these questions come up. And there may be people listening to this and going, ah, well, she, shouldn't have asked that question, or she should just anchor into this verse, or, there's something coming up there. And I think that's the part about the deconstruction and the reconstruction process that is so personal. And I would say if you are going through it, or if you decide to go through it, be so gentle with yourself.
Mm.
Be so loving and kind and gentle to yourself.
When you were going through, how did you find ways to do that? To be really gentle and to be really loving?
Yeah. I have a lot of different practices that I sort of collected along the way and leaned into. I would say affirmations
Mhm.
were a part of that. I would also say meditation was another part of that. Somatic breath work, another part of that. How can I lean into things that really show self-love for me and allow me to be really gentle with myself during this time and allow me to tap into my worthiness again and that I am allowed to take up space. I think as women, we're taught to be small, be nice, be busy, be constantly doing for others. And I really had to sit with how do I take care of me right now? I need to take care of me in a way that is so kind, so loving, so that I can show up and pour out my love for others in a way. And my heart has always been, I want to be loving and accepting of all people. And in order for me to do that, I have to do that for myself.
Absolutely. That is such an important message, and I'm so glad that you brought that up because for going through any sort of identity transformation, there is, especially for empaths or for women that hear that message of your value comes from how much you're able to serve other people. And then even ideas around, the path to fulfillment is in service to others, which is so true. But when you're already in a place of being so focused on, I need to prove my worth by continuing to serve other people, it can almost become a little bit of a damaging belief and then actions taken on that. And that I have found with a lot of people is still a sticking point. And so you seeing, I do need to pour into myself in order to serve other people. That is such a profound realization. And I'm just curious, like how was that pretty early on in your process? When did it happen when you had that I'm like feeling was a full body realization that that was the truth, that you did need to put yourself first to be able to serve?
Yeah. I'll say it was a progression over time. I think when I found myself initially in that the pressure cooker environment that I mentioned where I said, "Hey, I'm having a realization that I'm going to have to make some pretty drastic change." And it was almost like my mind couldn't quite comprehend it, but I had this deep inner knowing that things needed to change. And I had a deep inner knowing that said, I'm not going to be able to heal in the same environment in which I'm in. And so I'm going to have to eject myself. I'm going to have to sell my home. I'm going to have to move out of this city. I'm not going to be able to run into people at the grocery store and make small talk with a smile on my face. I knew that about myself. I knew that I needed to retreat and come home to me. And I knew that that was going to be a process, one in which I needed to protect myself, to allow myself to have a lot of alone time, which can be scary for some people to do, and also surround myself with people that I know that really love me, no matter what I believe, even if it's different from them, even if they knew me before as Sarah the Christian, right? And I think that that part, I didn't know yet what I was about to walk through, but it was almost like my heart knew. And so I needed to go through it and have that alone time. I'll tell you, one of the practices that I did throughout was journaling, a tremendous amount of journaling to really be able to pour out what I was feeling and thinking and the things that were coming up. And I also did a lot of solo travel. And the international solo travel was um, a huge part, I would say, of my process because I got to see people in all different walks of life and talk to so many different people about their beliefs, about their life, about things that they love. And it brought me so much joy, how big our world is, how beautiful our world is. And that was so healing and life-giving for me. And I also want to say, I understand my ability to do that. There was a huge amount of privilege in that, and I'm so grateful for it because it allowed me to go through this process and it allowed me to do things in a way. And it took, honestly, it took years. And I don't think the process will ever really be done. I think I've come to a place where I am so comfortable saying, I think in some ways I'll always be deconstructing and reconstructing, and I am great with that because I am about our journey of life. And it's it's been hard and also really beautiful. And I think now that I am this far out, I can lean into the beauty of what that has been like for me.
Wow. And I really feel it even on screen and anytime we talk. I feel this reverence that you have for your life and this gratitude that you have for getting to live so authentically. And so it does ripple out and positively impact me, and I'm sure many other people and the listeners now too. You have shared a number of truths for you that like having to do with nature and your worthiness and things like that. And I'm just wondering if there are any any truths that you want to wrap up here to share with this audience that you're feeling like particularly resonant with right now around any sort of beliefs in your reconstruction?
Yeah. I think that such a beautiful question. I think what continues to come up for me is love. My truth of leaning into love. How do I continue to more deeply love myself every day so that I can love others? And in doing so, like I get to love my life, I get to pour into women, I get to help them on their journey as they are building a life that they love. And so I would say that is my North Star. That is the thing that is really governing my life and how I want to show up. And I'll say for whoever is listening, it is hard to go through these things, and it is so worth it. And surround yourself with people that just love you no matter what. And they're here for you and they're here for your evolution. And not everyone will be able to go with you on that journey. And it is sad, and that includes some loss along the way. But I will say that the people that have shown up for me and that have loved me deeply through my reinvention, and I'll call it a reinvention, I think our generations before us went through a midlife crisis, and I call it my midlife awakening. It's been a reinvention and it's been beautiful, and I'm grateful for the people that have been with me along the way. And love is that one thing that continues to um, just hit me like a wave from the people that are in my life, and that I get to bless others with that love that pours out from me. And um, yeah, that would be the truth I anchor to.
Love it. That is the truth too. Love is the truth. So, for those who are just like, wow, you are incredible and I want to stay in touch, we'll have various links to be able to find you in any description where you're seeing this. But will you share with the audience the best ways to interact with you and any sort of invitations into your community at large?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say go to my website, sign up so that we can be connected there. And on LinkedIn is also a great place for us to be connected.
Great. Well, thank you again, Sarah, for sharing your powerful story and your presence and coming on here. I'm so grateful to you. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in to Shame to Shine.
Thank you, Stephanie.